Making mistakes is totally fine, and being allowed to fail is what makes us stronger as people. How can you ever expect to learn if you don't make a few errors along the way? When it comes to the grand stages of pro wrestling, however, you're unfortunately exposed to the power of the limelight, from dizzying highs to totally embarrassing lows. So if you're lucky, you'll get all the kinks out of your new ideas before you put them in front of the public eye. It might seem like a great idea you've got there, but in order for a gimmick to connect, it needs to be assigned to the right people to sell it. The groups in this list all hit speed bumps either before or after putting everything into gear and taking off from the start line. Thankfully, the people in charge caught it early and managed to course correct before things got very bad very quickly. I'm Si for WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 last-minute changes that saved wrestling stables. Number 10. The Brood. Christopher Daniels could never catch his WWE break. If the stories are to be believed, he was once considered to play the part of the higher power, the mysterious leader of the corporate ministry, essentially the boss of Undertaker and his goons, and responsible for all of their most devious acts. But instead, we got the "it was me, Austin" moment, so we can't really complain. That being said, Daniels was also eyed up for another evil stable during his tenure working dark matches for the WWE. According to Gangrel in a conversation with Chris Van Fleet, his Brood stable was originally set to star Edge, who the company was sure was going to be a big success, and young hopeful Christopher Daniels. It was Edge who pushed for Christian's inclusion, trying to find a space for his childhood friend. It's hard to say if the Fallen Angel would have been a good fit for the Brood, but it's certainly easy enough to picture. But the truth of the matter is, without Edge and Christian getting this moment to work together on WWE TV, it's possible that we wouldn't have gotten everything that came after it. And basically anything that stopped us from getting ENC's 5-second pose gimmick, forget about it. It's a shame that Daniels never got his shot in WWE, but the right decision was definitely made here. Number 9. The Shield. The WWE Universe was introduced to The Shield during CM Punk's 2012 world title reign, where they would routinely attack the straight-edge superstar's opponents. Months went by with CM Punk denying that he was affiliated with them. We as an audience could never quite tell if he was telling the truth or making barefaced lies, as he was wont to do. And the closest we got to confirmation was that Heyman had been paying the group off himself. With this story in the rearview mirror, The Shield could go on to bigger, better, and more importantly, their own things. In CM Punk's infamous tell-all appearance on the Art of Wrestling podcast with Colt Cabana, he said that the plan was indeed to bring the Shield in as his guys. On screen, they certainly played that idea from a distance rather than spelling it out, which thankfully made the group more ambiguous and harder to predict because of it. Punk additionally revealed that the original lineup that was pitched to him for a new stable did contain Seth Rollins, but he was to be joined by Daniel Bryan and The Big Show. Punk argued for a full set of younger stars, which thankfully was granted. Established wrestlers, especially those with tenure like Big Show, should never be your first port of call for a group that's going to upset the status quo quite the way that The Shield did. Number 8. Harlem Heat. When it comes to the best talent that WCW produced, then Booker T is in the conversation for one of the most important of all time. Not just as a singles star, hitting his peak just as the company was bought out, but before then whilst teaming with his brother Stevie Ray as the adored Harlem Heat. It's a really, really good thing that they didn't go with the original gimmick then. In the fall of 1993, the brothers debuted at a house show alongside manager Colonel Robert Parker, whose character was that of a stereotypical southern plantation owner. If you think you can already see where this is going, then yes, you are correct if you feel disgusted. Apparently, Booker and Stevie, then known as Kane and Cole, were to have been two men that the Colonel won in a gambling game, and perhaps worst of all, they came to the ring wearing shackles around their wrists and ankles. The phrase, "what the f*** were you thinking?" comes to mind, doesn't it? The audience reaction was so negative, unsurprisingly, that the gimmick was never trotted out in front of cameras. Very soon afterwards, the two got their far more appropriate and far more over gimmick as Harlem Heat, and history tried its best to swipe this terrible mistake under the rug. Number 7. The Inner Circle. He may have used it as part of his heel shtick, but there's nothing but truth in the fact that Chris Jericho signing with AEW was a massive get for the fledgling company. Jericho's Inner Circle were a major part of AEW's first couple of years, competing in legendary gimmick matches such as the Blood and Guts cage match and 2 Stadium Stampedes. The arrangement of the men within that group, however, was originally vastly different. It was Jericho himself that pitched for his future Jericho Appreciation Society stablemate Jake Hager to join him when the company originally suggested UK boxer and new signee Anthony Ogogo as the group's muscle. On the flip side, Jericho suggested that MJF join him as the young mouthy upstart, but AEW writers felt that it was better he was on his own and instead picked out Sammy Guevara. Finally, the tag team originally considered for the group was the Lucha Brothers, but as Jericho stated on his own podcast, that felt too superhero. He wanted a pair of vicious killers, and Santana and Ortiz fit the mold perfectly. Without the back and forth collaboration between Jericho and the booking team, the lineup of Inner Circle would have been vastly different, and it's fair to say that all of the best choices were made for both the men inside and outside of the stable. Number 6. Evolution. Triple H's on-screen presence throughout WWE for the last 30 years has been really rather consistent, and as such, you can kind of track the company by era depending on what he was doing. DX trips, Reign of Terror trips, Corporate Shield trips, NXT Daddy trips, etc. During the early 2000s, after the disbanding of DX, Triple H was leader of a stable by the name of Evolution. He represented the current state of the industry with his council, leather handbag in shape of a man Ric Flair, harkening back to wrestling's past. Perhaps the most important piece of the puzzle though was who should represent the future. Randy Orton was a no-brainer, but the muscle of the group at one point was a role considered for Mark Jindrak. So close was this decision to being final that Jindrak shot promotional material for the stable, but an assessment was made that he wasn't quite ready for that level of pressure. Even Jindrak himself has admitted in recent years that he wasn't the right fit, saying, "Attitude and shit matters, Orton got with it, I didn't." Evolution's proudest accomplishment is breaking out two of the industry's biggest stars of that era in both Randy Orton and Jindrak's eventual replacement, Batista. More than that, the former Evolution nominee departing WWE to go work in Mexico proved to be the right move for the young Jindrak. In essence, everybody benefited from this last-minute switcheroo. Number 5. Sanity. If you've never quite understood what appears to be random capitalization in Sanity's name, let me help you out here. The capital Y was for Eric Young, the capital A was for Alexander Wolf, the N-I lowercase t in the centre was for Nikki Cross, and the capital S was for Killian Dane. S for Sawyer Fulton. Sadly for Fulton, he's reduced to little more than wrestling trivia these days, as his tenure with WWE amounted to very little. After debuting as part of Sanity, he tore a pectoral muscle 2 months into their run and was ejected from the group. He was very quickly replaced by Dane and was sadly out of the company about a year later. Dane was the right man for the job and continued the group's momentum that had been gained from their intriguing vignettes, shock reveal of Eric Young as the leader, and their seriously underrated theme music. Dane provided that fallback position of the muscle to back up Sanity's anarchic behaviour in a way that Fulton couldn't have mustered. He cut a much more imposing figure and added an even more international flavour to the already varied group. To make matters worse for Fulton, however, the original Sanity concept was pitched to him way before the others got involved and was originally made up of himself, Solomon Crowe and Marcus Louis. It was put on hold, and when it finally did happen, pretty much opened the door for Fulton to be kicked out of the company. Number 4. Blackpool Combat Club. One of the most entertaining things on wrestling television right now is Blackpool Combat Club, and I'm putting my foot down on that. A beautiful, unexpected synergy of violence between veterans Jon Moxley and Bryan Danielson, led by the man we all wish was our dad, William Regal. Most recently, the group has expanded their roster to include Wheeler Yuta through a series of bouts that has not just told a fantastic story for the faction, but really grown Yuta's star power and fan appreciation. He wasn't the only name considered for the BCC's apprentice role, however, and Daniel Garcia was certainly one wrestler who came up in the discussion. We can't be sure how serious the talk got, but it was apparently quelled when Jericho spoke up and requested Garcia for his own new outfit, the Jericho Appreciation Society. It's possible that Garcia and Blackpool Combat Club could have worked, but Yuta's sympathetic and scrappy nature are what made that story so great, and it's tough to picture Garcia achieving quite the same effect. Number 3. The NWO. Objectively, one of the most important moments in wrestling history is the reveal of the third man. Hulk Hogan returning to WCW, casting off the red and yellow and his longtime babyface superhero character to join Hall and Nash and form the New World Order, shook the industry in ways that are still felt today. Whilst the NWO was always set to have 3 members, however, it wasn't always the case that Hogan was going to step into that role. How does a name like Sting grab you? Eric Bischoff even confirmed that Sting had agreed to the idea before the plans changed when Bischoff met with the Hulkster. Speaking on his podcast, 83 Weeks, Bischoff said, "Once Sting agreed to be the third man, it was literally within days that I ended up getting a phone call from Hogan and flew out to California." That is to say, it was around this time that a clearer picture came into focus for the WCW booker. While Sting, as one of the founding members of the NWO, may have been cool to see, it's hard to know if it would have worked, and most importantly, Hogan turning heel on Randy Savage to announce his position as the third man was a way bigger shock for the WCW audience. Moreover, the group's ongoing feud with the Icon gave Sting something to do for a very long time, so in truth, it positively affected both men's careers. Number 2. Team PCB. In the summer of 2015, WWE decided to celebrate the mutterings of a women's revolution and the successes of many of NXT's female talents by bringing several of them up to the main roster at once and putting them into randomly assigned teams like they'd all just passed around Harry Potter's sorting hat backstage. In truth, the less remembered about this era, perhaps the better. One team, however, stands out because of the controversy that, quite thankfully, WWE nipped in the bud before it got even worse. Paige, Charlotte and Becky were collectively known as Team PCB, which sounds like a name that was picked in about 6 seconds, which is likely the case. Just days beforehand, they debuted on Monday Night Raw as the Submission Sorority, much to the delight of the online wrestling audience, who immediately realised the name didn't just sound pornographic, it literally was the name of an adult video series. Seriously, all that money and all those employees, and nobody thought to Google this one. The scrambling for a name change was WWE trying to put out the fire before it spread, and sure, whilst many jokes were made, they were lucky not to get in genuine trouble with any sponsors or networks by accidentally name-dropping a porn series on their supposedly PG TV show. Number 1. The New Day. When you think of The New Day, you think of bright splashes of enthusiasm, Xavier Woods' trombone playing, and the power of positivity. This is a stark difference from the three men's first appearance together. After suffering several losses as a tag team, Big E and Kofi Kingston were approached by Xavier Woods, who claimed they wouldn't get ahead by kissing babies and shaking hands. It implied that the group was to take a militant edge, similar perhaps to the Nation of Domination from the 1990s. Vignettes began to air that at the time seemed very confusing, and to this day still feel totally at odds with the finished product. Woods in a tie and braces, speaking like a preacher man and riling up a gospel crowd who drape him in a sparkling robe and drag him away from the microphone. We were all left baffled and assumed that the gimmick was dead on arrival. Suffice it to say then that when the New Day hit the ring as a unit for the first time, their momentum began for real, and it only grew and grew. Whatever it was that the WWE was trying to impose on them, the men behind the idea superseded it and instead played the energetic and excitable characters that we know and love. Today, the New Day are recognised as one of the most successful stables in wrestling history. And that's the list. Let us know in the comments below what you thought of this video, as well as of any other wrestling stables you can think of that had last minute changes that saved them perhaps from certain doom. Or, in fact, do you think any of these original versions could have actually been worth something? Don't forget to hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the little notification bell. I've been Si from WhatCulture, and have a good week.